dropped it in a bucket, touchdown!
Backer transition three, bang!
He's bends it like Beckham. Are you kidding?
And welcome back for episode 45 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Last week, I gave you the 100% accurate, zero bias NFL honors predictions. Then we had great divisional games, and I will, of course, be predicting the AFC and NFC championship games. I keep trying to poke the MLB free agent market with a stick. Nothing is moving there for the last 2 weeks or so. However, we will talk about this year's Hall of Fame voting, the results, and what the almighty Baseball Writers Association got right and wrong. Here's a hint, not a lot, and a whole bunch, respectively. Then we'll touch on Ohio State catching fire, laying waste to college football in the second half of the year, Jimmy Butler stirring the pot with the Miami Heat, and then we'll have you on your way. I do need to correct this injustice first and foremost. I absolutely have to start with the Hall of Fame voting for the 2025 class. It was a good but not great class when you look at the entire list. I will spoil that for you right off the bat. Let's spitball here a few of the best players that did not make it, and I want you to keep those in mind as we talk about the select few that did. Carlos Beltran might be one of the best switch hitters ever for my money, and he was an advanced stats darling too, with over 70 wins above replacement, 2,700 hits, 435 home runs, and 312 stolen bases. You notice how that type of player essentially doesn't exist anymore? That much pop, hit for average, hit for power, stole bases, and good defender, throwing arm. I don't get it. The one bit of good news with Beltran, he's in his first year and he already got 70%, so he will definitely, I would say, get in next year. Andrew Jones had a very similar style of play. He hit 434 home runs. That's actually just one less, interestingly enough, than Carlos Beltran. 62.7 WAR, 10-time Gold Glover in the outfield. 66% of the vote, he's close, but remember, the threshold that you need is 75% for induction. Alex Rodriguez, obviously one of the best players that has ever picked up a bat by pretty much every measure, right? But still, the steroid era guys, or even guys that are associated with them, just cannot get in. A-Rod got 37.1% of voters, which is, roughly halfway to what he needs. Look, he and Barry Bonds probably have the two best pure counting stats careers in over 170 years of professional baseball, and they still cannot be celebrated among the greats. I'm not saying it's unfair. I more so would have loved to see what those two would have achieved 100% naturally. Now let's get to this year's modern era inductees, the three guys that actually made it, and we might get a little bit red in the face. It's a short list like every year, and it starts with Billy Wagner. He was a closer, played for 5 different teams, but was best known for his time with the Astros and Mets. Ichiro Suzuki, outfielder, primarily the Mariners. We don't talk about Marlins or Yankees Ichiro. And then CC Sabathia, right-handed starter with the then Cleveland Indians and the Yankees. The way we know that the bar is currently absurdly high, and the whole reason I'm even going to talk about this entire Hall of Fame class, is because of one person, one single voter. I wish this person had to face the consequences of their actions, but they don't. Ichiro Suzuki was one single vote away from the second ever unanimous induction to the Hall of Fame. Babe Ruth did not earn that. Randy Johnson did not earn that. Hank Aaron, Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, these are the consensus greatest ballplayers that have ever lived, and not a single one of them got 100% of the vote when they were up. The gold standard continues to be Mariano Rivera, he of the 652 saves, all with the Yankees, and that seems untouchable now. Prepare yourselves for the Ichiro pitch. You've likely heard that he came over from a wildly successful career in Japan, and he got to the big leagues at 27. He would then play in at least part of 19 additional seasons, and finally hang it up at age 45. What happened in between was magical, ridiculous, and it can't be replicated because baseball just isn't played that way anymore. A handful of the things Ichiro accomplished. 3,000 hits, with his first one coming at, again, age 27. 60 wins above replacement. 500 stolen bases. good enough for 35th all-time, and of course stolen bases have been really de-emphasized in the modern era. MVP and Rookie of the Year in year one. The single-season record for hits with 262. 10 straight Gold Gloves to start his career. 10 straight seasons of 200 or more hits. One of the best throwing arms the game has ever seen. There were some things that were totally not under his control that I'm guessing some people held against him. He only played in the postseason twice. He didn't win a World Series. He played in small markets up until his time with the Yankees at age 38, right? The usual suspects. The cognitive dissonance required, though, to just read that stat sheet for him, read the baseball reference page, and to vote no on him is stunning. What I really want out of this segment is a rule change. Just completely change how we handle Hall of Fame voting. Let's make every voter's ballot public. Let us see their name and everyone they did or didn't vote for. If there are some egregious patterns out there to one particular guy's vote, like they've never voted for a reliever, or they lower their standards clearly for certain positions, then either have a vote to remove them or give them, let's say, a 1-year timeout where you don't let them vote. Then maybe you turn it into a 3-strike policy for removal later on. As always, this is super theoretical, and the Baseball Writers Association is too good old boyish and traditional to actually do anything about this. C'est la vie. Just in case you were curious about the numbers and accomplishments of the other two guys, Sabathia and Billy Wagner, they read like this. Wagner's 8th all-time in saves, made 7 All-Star teams. He got a handful of Cy Young and even some MVP votes. He was a guy that could be used for saves longer than an inning if he had to, and he was really a true strikeout artist, finishing with a career 11.9 Ks per 9 in over 900 innings. There are more impressive relievers in the Hall, I will fully admit that, and in fact, 2 active closers have more saves than Wagner did. However, I believe the tipping point on this one was it was Wagner's 10th and final year on the ballot. Every year he had been creeping closer and closer, and this year he finally went over and got about 82%. CC Sabathia was a much easier call with about an 87% mark. CC was listed at 6'6", 300 pounds for much of his career, and he looked every bit of that. He hit every stat milestone that matters too. You had over 3,500 innings. That's way more than enough. Usually 3,000 is, roughly what you need. 3,000 strikeouts, 251 wins, 61.8 WAR. And you may have forgotten, but he did win a Cy Young with Cleveland. He did things that weren't so impressive. A career 3.74 ERA. He had a number of seasons between, a 4 to a 5 ERA. And his career ERA plus of 1.16, that's 16% better than an average pitcher of his time. As it turns out, though, and we all know this, longevity continues to be one of the most important things that the Hall wants to see for a career. And if you're just a tad above average, but you can stick around for 18, 20 years doing that, you're going to have a really good chance. A couple of players went one and done on the ballot by not getting at least 5% of the vote. A couple former Tigers on there. I got to shout out Ian Kinsler and Curtis Granderson. But also Troy Tulowitzki and Brian McCann are some of the names you'll probably know, and definitely some accomplished players, but not that good. This is the Hall of Fame we're talking about here. So that's that for the 2025 class. More than 3 should have made it, probably. Maybe Billy Wagner was a little bit borderline, but everybody liked and respected him, and one single contrarian kept Ichiro from history with the unanimous vote. Now we predict the AFC and NFC championship games. The Bills in Kansas City or the Commanders in Philly. Who's going to pull an upset? Off the bat, I have to say that at this point, the best 2 quarterbacks left in the playoffs are on the road teams. I don't really think that's arguable anymore. If Jaden Daniels just makes it to the Super Bowl this year, I think he's going to be the greatest rookie quarterback of all time, let alone if he wins the whole thing. I do think he's the one less likely to pull off the upset this week because his supporting cast probably just isn't quite as good. And there's a handful of reasons I feel super good about the Bills actually being able to pull this off and win in KC, so let's open that up. First of all, like it's been all year, the quarterback run game with Josh Allen is just on fire. It seems simple, and no, I am not just talking about the tush push by any means, but man, the Bills have just about perfected that. I mean, they look almost better than Philly did running it last year, but it's more so everything that Buffalo can do between the design running and scrambling. It's all set up by James Cook at running back, right? He just has fantastic vision and balance. And then the Bills rotate two other backs through. You have Ty Johnson and Ray Davis, and they're both fantastic on this per-touch basis. Buffalo just beat the league's best rushing team, the Ravens, at their own game. You know, they won the time of possession battle big time, and they just grinded out yards and first downs. Second, you've got the Bills' defense and the way it's complementary to their offense. They love to run base nickel. To get into the nerdy schematic side here a little bit, they do that by taking a linebacker off of the field, and you'll often see them with 4 defensive linemen, 5 defensive backs, and 2 linebackers. That means you can run the ball on them. You absolutely can. The Ravens got them for 176 yards on almost 6 yards a carry. It was a fantastic rushing day. However, the Bills still stick in that nickel a ton, and they do a good enough job against the run because of the physicality of that front 6. Then once they get to a multi-score lead, because Josh Allen just goes out there and plays Superman on offense, you have to throw the ball every down against them, even though running is much safer and more effective. Based on these two things, the QB run game and the Bills defense, I am going to take them over the Chiefs. It will be higher scoring than normal, I admit, and they'll probably make the Chiefs look like a great rushing team, which they aren't. It'll be another great quarterback duel. Obviously, Josh iced the game with a rushing touchdown late when they met in the regular season. The Bills will probably be outgained on the ground and through the air in this one. That would not surprise me at all. But I think if you get a couple of turnovers from Mahomes, then that same formula from the Ravens game last week works. Just grind it out, hold the ball, don't make mistakes. Score prediction here, let's go 31-27 Bills. It does bear repeating that the Chiefs have now made 7 straight AFC Championship games, the second longest streak ever, only behind the Patriots from 2011 to 2018. I just want to give them their flowers on that. I do not want to see a three-peat in the Super Bowl because out of all the greatest dynasties ever in the NFL, no team has ever pulled that off. Well, it won't be long until we find out, but I do believe that Josh Allen can finally end this run. Now to the NFC Championship, the Commanders would be a Cinderella story if they make it through. We know it was supposed to be the Lions representing the NFC and probably even winning the Super Bowl this year, right? But as it turns out, you cannot win a game and turn it over 5 times. Those things just don't go together. I will repress all my personal feelings and we'll move on to this game. The hopes that the Commanders have of beating the Eagles, they quietly have a really good front 7 that nobody talks about. They have a great pair of defensive tackles. You got Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen, longtime teammates dating back to Alabama in 2014. Future Hall of Fame middle linebacker Bobby Wagner, who was an All-Pro this year for literally the 11th time in a row. That doesn't even make any sense. Dante Fowler is an underrated edge rusher. He had 10.5 sacks for Washington. Lots of good pieces. On the other side, the Eagles' offensive line. It is far and away the best in the league, right? And the best piece of their whole team. I hope that that's not controversial anymore after watching how they embarrassed the Rams on the ground. However, Jalen Hurts was pretty much immobile last week after that play where he got all bent up and his knee was tucked under him. He's still probably going to try to make some of his improv-type plays, get pressured, and maybe make some mistakes. In any other scenario, though, Washington is probably toast. My best guesses on this game, I just think Saquon Barkley is on too dominant a run right now. I just saw he has the highest rushing prop that sports bets have offered in 3 years. It's at 124.5, his rushing line right now. So Vegas thinks he's going to dominate. The Eagles' offensive line has done that the entire year. It wouldn't be anything new. I'm going to guess Saquon goes for over 150 in a tud even. I'm going to get a little aggressive there. I just mentioned last week that the Eagles' defense ranked first in points and yards allowed, and I don't think there's any guarantee that Washington can break that trend. I understand Jaden Daniels has been amazing, and he is possibly the hottest quarterback in the league right now. There's just reasons to always be a little hesitant on rookies. It's a divisional game, which makes this even just a little bit more juicy. The two regular season matchups between them were sick, too. The Commanders beat them week 16 to essentially take the Eagles out of the race for the number 1 seed. That was the game where Jaden Daniels had 5 touchdown passes, and the Commanders scored 22 in the fourth quarter to come back. And then the Eagles won 26-18 in week 11. This is not the regular season anymore, but there is now a bunch of film from both sides, so there's not a lot of secrets. I am biased against rookie QBs and toward experienced ones. I'm thinking 2 turnovers for Jaden Daniels and a down day for the Commanders' offense in a loss. I'm going to say final score, Eagles 27, Commanders 16. Like always, I want to see some close games, some good games. Just don't give me anything on championship weekend that is completely predictable. I won't be rooting against anyone, except for the Chiefs, but it's only because I'm mad about how good they are in their whole dynasty, I admit. And now for some elephants in some big old rooms. The Ohio State University rolled everyone in the first 12-team college football playoff, and I mean everyone. They're going to stand among the greatest single-season college football teams ever. Not just because of what they won, but for who they beat with maybe the most difficult schedule of all time. 5 wins over top 10 ranked opponents, which were 5th ranked Indiana, at number 9 Tennessee for the first round of the playoff. Then the rest of the playoff is where it got insane. Top ranked undefeated Oregon, 5th ranked Texas, and number 7 Notre Dame in the rest of the playoff. Remember, this team finished 4th in the Big Ten, and they lost to Michigan of all teams in the game, which I know you and I haven't forgotten. But I think if they had beaten Oregon in week 6, when they matched up for the first time this year, Oregon was ranked 3rd at the time, and especially if they had beat Michigan at the end of the year, I think it would have been the greatest season ever, bar none. Even better than Michigan last year or, 2019 LSU or whichever other team is your favorite. People were calling for head coach Ryan Day's job after the loss to Michigan. Those same people now look very sheepish. Do I think he is the most elite coach in the world? No. He doesn't have to be, though. Eventually, his entire starting roster and probably some of his coaching staff is going to end up in the NFL. He was there at the right time. He obviously did some positive things culture-wise. And recruiting at Ohio State can't be that difficult, can it? Hey, do you want to play at one of the best programs ever, probably get rich off of NIL money from the richest school in America, and go to the league if you're any good? I'm not personally happy about Ohio State and their championship, but I can recognize the enormity of the achievement and the insanity of their whole season. On the Notre Dame side, they are probably not going to get back there for decades. Execution is king on the biggest stage. It just is when you watch any football game with some weight to it. And Notre Dame did not execute on defense to the tune of 34 points and 445 yards against. I'd like to complain about Notre Dame's offense, but they were trailing most of the game. You can obviously circle the quarterback, Riley Leonard, being the team's leading rusher, and only getting 53 yards on the ground for the game. It's not good. It's not why they lost, though. Definitely didn't do as much college football as I wanted to this year. Might have some more plans in the works to get into it a little bit more next year, but the playoff, chef's kiss. Now on to the ever-waxing Jimmy Butler saga. What a strange attachment the Heat are holding on to here. Jimmy has made it beyond clear that he wants a trade, and who's to say if he did it intentionally, but Butler just picked up a 2-game suspension for missing a team flight heading out on a road trip. They told him to stay home then, which I think is awesome, with some lovely legal speak. They called it, quote, a continued pattern of disregard of team rules, insubordinate conduct, and conduct detrimental to the team. Why continued, you ask? Because it was actually his second team suspension this year. The first one was 7 games. The NBA trade deadline is on February 6th. It's going to be here before we know it, right? Why would he ever play another game for the Heat if they don't honor his trade request? Go ahead, rip up the game checks, set him on fire. You can drag his name through the mud publicly as a whole organization. None of that matters when you're making NBA money. And you're just that generally famous, too. It's a league that really lends itself to that, the pure megastardom. Of course, the value that Butler provides on the court is a part of what the asking price for a trade would be. That's why I think his leverage is not fantastic. This man is, an above average starter, but I don't know if he's all that much more. So let's dig into it a little bit. He's made 6 All-Star teams. That is a good number, right? He's averaged over 20 points a game 9 times. Things to consider. He only averages 62 games per full season. Obviously, character concerns. And I know it feels to a lot of people like he's been with Miami for a long time, but this is year 6. LeBron's been with the Lakers longer. Jimmy was drafted to the Bulls. He had quick stops in Minnesota and in Philly. And he's rarely, if ever, the best player on his own team. He's famous for catching fire in the playoffs, and those playoff runs are always fun, but he has no rings and a losing record in the playoffs to show for it. A 35-year-old seeking almost $50 million a year, and you aren't trying everything in your power to unload that contract. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I think he should literally be made available to all 29 other teams. Some might not have enough talent to really swing a trade for him that is convincing, that is something the Heat would actually want. And if it becomes a question of draft picks too, well, sometimes you have to think multiple years into the future, so there's no guaranteeing somebody giving up, for example, a first rounder in a trade package. All food for thought there. But there are plenty of middle-of-the-pack teams, especially those that are probably headed toward the play-in tournament, where he would still go and be a good upgrade. If he isn't dealt by next week, then I'll probably go into all the best trade destinations with him and track everything else that's going on at the trade deadline because I haven't gotten into that at all yet. I don't think by any means that Jimmy Butler is the only one that's going to be moved when it comes to big names, but like I say, we'll find out soon enough. And that'll do it for this week. As you know, whatever else catches my eye is always on the table. And remember, you can always feel free to hit me on my socials if you have an idea for me. This has been episode 45 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
He dropped it in a bucket. Touchdown.
Becker transition 3, bang!
He's bends it like Beckham. Are you kidding?